Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
3, 2, 1. Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. We're halfway through the college football season. We enter week 7. And it is going to be a fun week. Not a lot of games to talk about, but a handful of really good games this week. There's some big ones this week for sure. Another tough week for the Dynamite in the picks column, I must say. The only thing good about continuing to lose is you lose less and less each week because you're putting less and less money. So, $1,000 loss again this week. That brings your balance down to $14,398. You did have a couple good picks. I don't think there were a lot to choose from, but your 6-point teaser with Tennessee +3, Louisville +3, Kansas State +4 was a nice little +160 teaser. And, of course, Texas -7 versus Oklahoma looked like a genius move. The one who did not look like a genius move was you putting $462 on the Nevada Wolfpack on the year. So, tough week, but nonetheless, you probably have boycotted Nevada for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
I will at least say.
I probably should have done that a few weeks sooner, but finally done with them now that they've lost to Colorado State.
Yes. I had a losing week, but I only lost $51. So my balance is down to $30,022.55. So I had a not great week, but I sort of broke even pretty much. I had a couple decent picks. The South Carolina +310 money line was really good because by the time the game started, that was almost like a 3-point spread. When we did our show, it was 6-7 point spread. And then my Buffalo Bulls, -2 versus Bowling Green for 500 was pretty good. Speaking of taking bad teams with big money, New Mexico +3.5 for Wyoming for $500. They did enough to tease me up 14-0. Give up a cheap touchdown right before half, and then it goes terrible in the second half. And then just the gut punch of the week, Memphis up 28-6, and somehow does not come away with the win. Up 28-6 with about 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So Houston just continually finds a way to ruin my week. Now, they didn't totally ruin my week because I got a little in-game action on Houston. I figure either Houston's down big and they're going to make their comeback, or they're up big and they're going to lose. So if you're playing live lines, just see what Houston's doing in the fourth quarter and take the opposite of that. But nonetheless, losing week for us both. We'll try to pull out a winning week this week. What did you make of this week's games?
Yeah, we've got a lot of good matchups, undefeated teams, some stuff that are really going to be meaningful games as far as it comes to conference standings. I'm personally biased in the Tennessee-Alabama matchup, but, the Big Ten's got Michigan, Penn State, Clemson and Florida State. I think that means a little bit. NC State, Syracuse, Syracuse is still undefeated, so NC State needs a win there. But a lot of good matchups, and I probably missed some there. Just go through them, but USC has to go into Utah. That's going to be another interesting one. So I think the volume isn't there this week, but the quality's there, and a good handful of games.
Definitely so. All right, so let's start out in the ACC. State goes to Syracuse. Syracuse continues their hot start. They were off last week, so 2 weeks to prepare for this game. But NC State had a nice win versus FSU. Not pretty, but coming off the Clemson loss, they sort of bounced back there. So NC State to Syracuse. I know we differed on this a little bit. I didn't really go strong straight bet Syracuse-wise, but I don't trust NC State going on the road up to Syracuse, but you're pretty big on NC State here. So what'd you like about the matchup here for NC State?
Yeah, I really like their defense, and they really are good at keeping control of the game, and their offensive struggles. I think Syracuse is a little bit more susceptible than people think. I think they beat Purdue in a weird little second half shootout, but they may be able to work their magic at home. But I think the defense of NC State's going to shine in this one.
Yeah, I just, like I said, I didn't totally trust them on the road. Now, the 4.5 number certainly is pretty nice, especially if you sort of look back at like the beginning of the year. This line probably would have been about 8 to 10 for NC State, and now you're all the way flipped to Syracuse as a 4.5 point favorite. It'll be interesting to see, how Syracuse plays. They really haven't played a lot of competition other than that Purdue matchup with I mean, they sort of won it. It was, both teams trading touchdowns late after doing nothing for 3 quarters. So it'll be interesting to see how Syracuse responds in this game versus another big-time team, especially with the Clemson game, upcoming the next week, where Syracuse has sort of played Clemson tough in the ACC the last handful of years.
Yeah, we'll see what the real Syracuse is after this week. I think they're kind of a little bit of a pretender, and NC State's just, I think they're the real deal, even though they've got that loss to Clemson. But Clemson may prove me wrong. Florida State had a shot to win the game there at the end last week against NC State and stupidly threw the ball at the 20-yard line when a field goal would win the game. So we'll see. A lot depends on the health of NC State's quarterback. I think he's going to play. He got knocked out in that last game, but I think he's supposedly going to play this weekend. So it should be a really good game.
Yeah. All right, let's move to Clemson, Florida State. This one's interesting because I was reading some more stuff about the line, which you pointed to me and thought it was low. It looks low to me, and actually a lot of the online books open this as a 7-point Clemson favorite. And then I think it was Circa out in Las Vegas, who's one of the ones that all these, sort of online books and all the little ones take from, put it at 5, and then it's worked its way as everybody sort of moved it down to 5, has worked its way back down to 3.5. So interesting line movement there, especially since really 3.5 to 5 doesn't really matter that much overall in sort of point total numbers. 4, 5, 5.5 isn't all that big. Once you get to 6, then it starts getting. But what do you make of this game? Interesting line movement because at 7, I do think I would probably stay away from Clemson. But when it's down hovering around 3.5, I really do like Clemson here. Now, I didn't end up putting this in my straight bets, but you have it in yours. So what did you like Clemson, Florida State here?
Yeah, I'm really confused by this line. You explained some of it there, but I don't know the reasoning behind it because, in my opinion, I think Clemson's really hit their stride these last couple of weeks. The offense has started to show up. They're hitting on all cylinders. Their defense is still consistently pretty good. So I'm shocked by this. I think Florida State's kind of not really been that impressive this year. Their wins were against teams they should have beaten, and those were hard to come by. So I think Clemson's really going to dominate this game. So, yeah, I think you're safe to take this one all the way up to 7. Then you start getting a little worried. But I like this at 3.5 for sure.
Yeah, I certainly like it at 3.5. I think I have it in a couple of my parlays. I think I have it in a couple of my money line parlays. I got a couple of those that are sitting like at 170, 220, and I paired a couple of those up where I think the better team sort of has, a nice line there, and you pair them up with the other one, and you sort of are hovering around even, a little bit over even in those 2-team money line parlays. But I don't know. Something about it just told me not to take it straight. I think last year, Florida State, didn't they upset them? And we had a head-to-head, and I think I hit it weirdly because Florida State scored some weird touchdown there at the end, and I think it was like one of the 3 wins Florida State ended up having on the year. But that was a totally different Clemson team. You've mentioned it. They seem to have, I wouldn't say they're a juggernaut on offense, but they've at least found a rhythm and are consistently able to score, 24 to 30 points, which they were really struggling doing. And the defense has, continued to be solid year in and year out. All right, so bets for the ACC. I don't have any straight bets here in the ACC, so what are you looking at in the ACC here?
Yeah, I'm taking those two games we talked about. I like Clemson minus the 3.5 for sure. That's one of my bigger plays. Well, I say bigger. I'm going 2 units on that. $288. I got to get some money in the bank built back up, and then a little play, $144 on NC State plus the 4.5. I think that's already moved down to 3, so it's moving a little bit there. But I think NC State should win this game.
Yeah, it'll be interesting certainly to watch that one and see how NC State does on the road. I didn't have any really great matchups in the AAC this week, and the one that may be a little bit worth talking about, SMU versus Navy. I took in my straight bets, so I have SMU minus the 12.5 versus Navy, who's played actually pretty well this year. Had a solid game versus Air Force, 10-7 that they lost. Win over East Carolina. They won last week as well. So, but really what I did to look at this game, I put SMU and Memphis in and around about the same level. And when Navy went to Memphis and played, it was about 37 to, I think 13, maybe 17. It was a blowout game. So this 12.5 line, SMU has had a tough stretch scheduling wise the last couple weeks. So I think going back home and playing Navy, they ought to put it on them pretty good. So I liked the SMU minus 12.5 for 250 for me. Doesn't look like you have anything in the AAC. There really wasn't a lot. I think there were a lot of buys this week in the AAC.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why our volume's down. I think there's a lot of teams that have buys picking up this week. You mentioned I looked at this one, but I had Air Force in that Air Force Navy matchup, and I saw how tough Navy competed, so that kind of got me to back away from this one. But we'll see. Navy's one of those teams where they could kind of keep it really ugly, where they can just completely get run out of the stadium. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of those where I think the initial line sort of is there to sort of scare you off at that 12.5. And that's why I sort of looked, because I knew Navy had been playing well, but, I saw that Memphis game, and, that's probably the best team Navy had played so far this year, and they got handled pretty good. So, going to SMU, I thought it would be, a similar type scoreline. So I'm willing to grab the, sort of big 2-touchdown favorite there. Let's move to the Big 12. I don't know if I'd classify this as a big game, but it's an interesting game nonetheless. It lost a little bit of luster with Daniels, going out for Kansas, but the backup North Texas kid who, I watched play a little bit the last handful of years as North Texas, came in, played pretty well. He's a veteran and a solid quarterback. He's not as dynamic as Daniels, but if you watch that game versus TCU, he was throwing good balls. So if he continues to throw good balls, I look at this game as a shootout. It looks like Gabriel might play in this one, and that's sort of why I didn't quite grab Oklahoma or Kansas in this, because I wanted to wait and see, because I think this is a different game. If Gabriel plays, this turns into a big-time shootout, and if he doesn't, I think Kansas can run away with that. But with the line being, 7, 8, 9, I think that says that everybody thinks Gabriel's playing in this one.
Yeah, if Gabriel's playing, I think we're going to get a kind of a replay of what we saw Kansas against TCU last week, and it's just as back and forth, and TCU kept answering. But, like you said, backup quarterback for Kansas played really well. That line's getting really tempting. I think last I looked, it was up to 9. Yeah. Which is interesting considering Oklahoma's played like hot garbage for 2 weeks in a row and doesn't play any defense. Now, Gabriel coming back may be enough of a morale boost to get them back in it, but I'm not so sure. Your over looks pretty good, but I may be talked into taking Kansas in the points before too long.
Yeah, I think if it sticks around that 9, I probably will grab it even if Gabriel comes back. And if Gabriel isn't healthy, you grab that 9 all day long, because whatever rando that Oklahoma has playing quarterback back there is not going to be able to beat Kansas. And we've certainly seen the Oklahoma defense be sort of trashed a little bit. So the theory last week where I said the pro style offense might suit Oklahoma's defense a little better did not work out all that well. They got trashed by a more option attack and a more pro style attack. So either way, it wasn't good. So I maybe they could bounce back a little bit here versus Kansas team, but I'd certainly look at that money line too. This might be one where you just splash a little on that money line and see what happens because, I was impressed with the way Kansas played. So versus TCU, who we'll get into here in a second, is probably playing to be the number one team in this conference this weekend as well. So, if Kansas can hang with them, they can certainly hang with Oklahoma. All right, let's switch to that one and go to TCU versus Oklahoma State. TCU, Oklahoma State. This is probably easily the two best teams in the Big 12. They've certainly played the best so far in the Big 12. Oklahoma State goes to TCU. I know you've been big on TCU this year, but I think in our conversations you've been a little bit more slightly leaning towards Oklahoma State here, but no straight bet for you in this one. So you sort of talked yourself out of it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm really – every time I look at this, I get tempted, and then I'm just staying away because – Oklahoma State's just one of those teams that can really kind of throw something at you that you're not expecting. And I think they're capable of beating TCU, but I also think they're capable of just getting completely destroyed by TCU. TCU's offense has looked really, really good. Quarterback's playing tremendous. And this being a home game for them, I think gives them a little bit of an advantage. I think that's why the line is what you see it with TCU actually giving up some points here. That 4.5 is really tempting for Oklahoma State, though. I think this is going to be a close, hard-fought game. But for the reasons of unpredictability, I'm staying away from this one. I just don't think there's any indication of what's going to happen.
Yeah, I go back, and you probably shouldn't look at that first game of the season. But you look at that, and Oklahoma State had troubles stopping an offense that runs a similar style in Central Michigan as TCU. TCU just has much better players. So I worry a little bit that Oklahoma State's defense has been much better since that game, but they also really haven't, I'd say, played an offense that is that electric like TCU's offense has been. So I'm curious if Oklahoma State's defense sort of regresses back to what we saw in that Central Michigan game. What gives me more worry is Central Michigan has basically been awful, ever since then. So if they're giving up 40 to a Central Michigan offense, are they giving up 50 to a TCU offense? And then you're asking, can Oklahoma State score 50 on TCU? Yes, maybe so, but that becomes harder and harder on the road. So I just was sort of in stay away mode from this game, see how this game plays out, and sort of reassess the Big 12 after this. We'll see if Texas can sort of work their way back into the Big 12 conversation as well.
Yeah, this is a real big game for the Big 12. I think I don't think they could really have a preference who wins this game, but I think whoever wins this game, the Big 12 is going to be really rooting hard to run the table and stay undefeated.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure who has the best shot at that, really. TCU's offense may be fooling us a little bit. They have played Kansas and Oklahoma in back-to-back.
Yeah. All right, so let's go to our Big 12 bets. I got one, you got none. I got Kansas, Oklahoma, 62.5 on the over. That just seems pretty low. We just watched Kansas and TCU play in the 30s. If Gabriel's back, Oklahoma should be able to score, in easily the 28 to 30 point range. And really, if you look at it, even in the Oklahoma game before that, where they got beat up by TCU, Oklahoma was scoring points. They just couldn't stop TCU until Gabriel, got smashed, and then they sort of couldn't score points anymore. But I think they had 14 or 17 when Gabriel was in there. So they were going to hit that 35-point mark. Now, they weren't going to stop TCU, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that 30 points are coming from both sides here. So I like that 62.5. I would also suggest taking that now because I think by Saturday, and certainly once it's probably confirmed that Gabriel comes back, that thing probably climbs up to 64, 65 points.
Yeah, definitely.
Nothing for you in the Big 12
No.
straight this week. All right, so we'll move to the Big 10. 2 games in the Big 10 I thought were worth talking about. Penn State, Michigan is the first one. This is interesting. Penn State probably has, I'd say, the best win with a win at Auburn, though, that's semi-questionable. But at least players of competent talent. Michigan's schedule's still been a little weak. The Maryland win looks okay. I wouldn't say great, but what do you make of this Penn State-Michigan game? I thought 7 was a lot of points for a game I think will be definitely played close to the vest here.
Yeah, I've been watching Michigan this last couple weeks, and after dominating the first 3 weeks against their non-conference schedule, once they started getting into conference, they've really been struggling to put teams away as well as they were earlier, and they've been in a lot of close fights. You mentioned the Maryland win. Yeah, that looks good, but is it? Penn State dominated Auburn. That doesn't seem to be a great win. It's always tough to go down to a road SEC team. That might be the toughest game that any Big Ten team has played this year. But I think the 7 points, I don't know if that's just all due to the home field advantage for Michigan, that's being in Michigan. I'd see Penn State being favorites if they were at home. So that's a lot of points just for the home field. But I'm shocked that it was 7 because I don't think Penn State's shown me anything that, says that they're that much worse than Michigan, and Michigan hasn't shown me anything that they're that amazing other than dominating teams they're supposed to. So I think getting 7 in what could be an even matchup is pretty good value.
Yeah. I just looked at this game. It sort of felt like a Franklin special of probably winning into the fourth quarter and then doing something ridiculous and, Michigan stealing the win there. So, I just thought 7 was a little too much. It's really sort of hard to handicap these teams because they really haven't played anybody. This is the first, matchup. We'll see how Penn State goes on the road, but they've already proven, at least it's difficult to go on the road. And, we mentioned Michigan in that Maryland game. It didn't look like their home field mattered all that much. And I thought it was a little weird because this line tells me that if Michigan went to Penn State, Michigan would probably be a 2 or 3 point favorite. And I can't believe that they would, give points to Penn State at home in a game like that. So just a weird line, nonetheless, but should be an interesting game. It'll at least maybe measure out to see if one of these teams can, at least lay a finger on Ohio State. I don't have much hope of that, but at least if they could keep winning, maybe some confidence builds. But we'll move to the next game here. This might be a battle for the Big Ten crappy region here. So Minnesota goes to Illinois. This one, I feel like I'm getting trapped in. I did remove it from my straight bets, I will say, because I originally had Minnesota, and I just didn't want to. But, I've watched both these teams play, and I just think Minnesota's a better team here. But, I've been bit by that before. So what did you make of this matchup, Minnesota versus Illinois?
Yeah, I rode Minnesota last time they had a big game, and it bit me in the butt. You told me otherwise. They kind of let me down in the big game situation, and I think this might be a spot where Illinois could get the win. I was actually thinking about putting Illinois in my straight bets, so I guess we balance each other out there. Yeah. It should be a hard-fought game, and it's really just going to depend on if Minnesota can really get rolling offensively. But, they got that big win over Wisconsin, but now that doesn't really look like anything because Wisconsin's terrible. That's really what they had their resume built on. So they still got to kind of prove it to me. And this is a good shot, I guess. It's Illinois, but this one could go either way. I was really tempted to take Illinois plus the 6.5 or 7. It's been floating around there.
Mm-hmm.
but I'm just going to stay away from this one for sure.
Yeah, I think the number threw me off, that I just didn't want to grab Minnesota with that many points, on the road. And basically the one team they played, that's been difficult this year was Purdue at home. And it was, I believe, 17-14 was the final score of that game. Maybe it was 14-10. It was a very low scoring, game where Minnesota's offense had been scoring 40-plus points every week and beating everybody by 40 points. Then all of a sudden they step up a little in competition and it sort of drops. So I'm curious how they respond going onto the road here in Illinois. And, say what you will about Burt, but he wins Big Ten games. It's not always pretty, and he throws a couple away like he did that Indiana game. You go back and look at that, Illinois could be undefeated if they knew how to game manage a little bit better. But nonetheless, I leaned a little bit more Minnesota. You seem to lean a little bit more Illinois. It'll be interesting to see. I still think Purdue's probably the favorite out of this one, but I don't think we think Purdue's any special shakes either. So it's probably between, I think, Illinois, Minnesota, and Purdue to sort of seize control of that division. So straight bets here in the Big Ten. What do you got going on?
Yeah, I've just got that Penn State plus the 7. I think that's good value and what should be a good matchup. I'm going to take the 7 points. I think it'll at least be a close game, and so I'll ride that advantage.
Yeah, I'm the same. I match you. I got Penn State plus a 7 versus Michigan here at 250 for me, and then I'm going to go with a little bit of an upset. Michigan State getting 245 versus Wisconsin. I know Michigan State hasn't been good, but Wisconsin hasn't been good either. Michigan State's had a lot of road games early on in their schedule. So I think going back home, here versus a poor Wisconsin team, giving them 245, I just think is pretty good value. I think we both think this game's going to be a stinker, and you give me a stinker game with two teams who are prone to turn the ball over. I get a couple fumbles my way. I get the 245. So I just thought, I guess Wisconsin played well last week versus Northwestern, but, speaking of horrendous teams in the Big Ten, I'm not ready to overreact to Wisconsin. Also, they lost one of their running backs last week in that Northwestern game, so I'm not completely sold yet that Wisconsin is back and playing good football. I'll just take a little shot on the plus 245. I thought it was pretty good value. All right, let's go to Conference USA. No real good matchup. Once again, there were, I think, a lot of buys in this one, but you got a straight bet on here.
Yeah, I'm taking North Texas. They've been good to me this year. I'm taking them again, this time at home. Kind of large spread, but it's under that touchdown line there at -6.5, hosting Louisiana Tech. I'm a little nervous because North Texas is susceptible on defense. They give up a lot of points, but they also score a lot of points. So I'm going to take the home team minus just under a touchdown. I've got just $144 play on that for me.
Yeah, I looked at this one, and I sort of liked La Tech. Now, it's really hard to judge La Tech because basically they're one win is a subdivision win that you mark off. Their 3 losses are all losses that basically you'd expect them to have. They weren't any games you'd pencil them in winning. And then I thought they played well in that UTEP game last week. Now, granted, that's at home. So while I leaned to Louisiana Tech, getting that 6.5 points, I didn't know if I trust them going to North Texas. We've seen North Texas be, once again, much better at home than on the road. But I also don't know how much I trust that defense versus a solid offense in Louisiana Tech. So I just ended up sort of crossing it out. I might have thrown Louisiana Tech in a parlay, maybe a money line thing where they were getting maybe okay value. But just because I thought they played well in that UTEP game. But you don't know how much of that is Louisiana Tech playing well in a game at home where they've always traditionally played well. And then they go on the road to North Texas where they've always traditionally played well and sort of, spit the bit there. So I ended up staying away straight bet for that one. We'll move to the MAC. This one's interesting. it's not what we'd call a marquee matchup, but after UConn's win last week, we did a little schedule dive, and there are 3 more winnable games for UConn on the schedule. This would be one of them if they want to get bowl eligible, which I don't think anyone probably penciled in at the beginning of the year. They got to go into Ball State and win. So UConn, Ball State. I think Ball State's won us over a little bit because we both sort of like them a little bit more as they've won a couple games in the MAC. Now, granted, that's taking advantage of, for some reason, the Compass Michigan schools have all fallen apart at the same time. But what do you make of UConn Ball State here?
Yeah, things seem to kick off for Ball State after that weird win over Northern Illinois. That just doesn't make any sense to me at all. That Northern Illinois had like a 3-touchdown lead in that game and cost me a parlay and a straight bet. But yeah, you're right. I think this is another opportunity for UConn to get another win. They've got a couple good ones. They got one that was over some nobody Connecticut school, I think, some subdivision team.
Central Connecticut State, you know them from basketball.
But anything can happen, especially with this MAC and UConn. It really just depends on how they come out that day, especially Ball State.
All right, let's move to the real matchup here in the MAC that's entertaining. Kent State versus Toledo. Now, it's interesting because I think we both thought Kent State got a little bit of a bloated spread 2 weeks in a row, and they ended up losing that game to Miami of Ohio. More than anything, it's just hard to get a read on this Kent State team because basically they played a ridiculous non-conference schedule, and then they open up in conference Ohio, Miami of Ohio, and Toledo. You're basically playing, other than Buffalo, the 3 other teams that we'd probably say are the best teams in the MAC right now.
Yeah.
So what do you make of this team? Certainly Toledo should be favored in this one, but I think they overcorrected a little bit here because they probably made Kent State too much of a favorite the first 2 weeks, but I think they've made Toledo too much of a favorite this week. So I leaned a little bit more Kent State. I didn't end up putting into my straight bets, but what do you see in this matchup here?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I was really close, just a knee-jerk putting Kent State in my straight bets just because I thought that was a lot of points for a team that I think I picked originally in the preseason to win the conference. But I kind of look back at how they performed this year. While Toledo's had a little bit of an easier schedule, I think they've really taken care of business and dominated where Kent State struggled. So I think Toledo, yes, should be the favorite, but that line is a little bloated, like you say. So I may get talked into taking the points, but because it could end up being a really close game.
Yeah.
So those points could end up pretty good because I think it was up to 9.
Yes, it was.
Last time I looked, which is quite a bit. But it really just depends on how much Kent State's got left in the tank because they've been through a lot of tough battles, that's for sure.
Yeah, towards the end of the MAC season, I assume they're playing some of the crappy teams. I might jump on them then for sure, but I certainly might liven up a little bit by Saturday and grab that Kent State because I think this game means everything to both these teams here who probably think this is one of the teams they need to beat to win that MAC. So I certainly think this will be a tight game. So I thought the line was a little bit bloated. All right, straight bets for the MAC. What are you looking at here?
Yeah, you spoke a little bit about that Miami of Ohio team. They've kind of been sneaky good this year. They've covered some good spreads. They've won some games that they were underdogs in, and they're favorites in this one. But I think they're playing against a really poor team in Bowling Green. Yeah, they're going on the road, but I think Miami of Ohio is going to dominate this one. So I'm taking Miami of Ohio minus the 6.5, 2-unit play for me, $288. And then I'm going to take another big favorite. I'm going to take Buffalo. Now they're minus 17 on the road at UMass, but Buffalo has been really laying it on the teams that they're supposed to lay it on to, and I think they're going to put up a lot of points on UMass. So I'm going to take them to easily cover the 17. This is one of my bigger plays of the week, 3 units on that, $432 on Buffalo minus 17.
Yeah, I'm going to stick on the UConn wave and ride it. They've won 2 of their last 3 games, so 9.5. I don't think we thought we'd see Ball State as 9.5-point favorites all year long. So I think I'll grab onto that. And then plus 275. I think that's decent money line because I think talent-wise, it's probably pretty close here. UConn's been pretty spunky, so they've been able to put up some points. The other thing I think works in UConn's favor here is this isn't a conference game for Ball State. It basically means nothing. So, this means everything to UConn and basically nothing to Ball State. Their job is to win conference games right now. So, I think that might come into play a little bit too. So UConn 9.5, I got 500 on that, and UConn plus 275 on the money line. I got 125 on that one. No real game in the Mountain West to discuss. A lot of the good teams off. We do have straight bets on a couple of games I almost put in here, so I figured that would work our way. So straight bet wise, what are you looking at here in the Mountain West?
Yeah, this is probably one of my more active conferences this week, and normally I work my way looking at the schedule. I have a lot more picks earlier in the day and fewer on the West Coast time slots. But I had a lot that I really liked in this one, starting with your team from last week who just let you down, New Mexico. I've got them -6 at New Mexico State. This big rivalry game, they're going on the road, but I think they're a much better team than New Mexico State. But I'm just going to put one unit, $144 on that one at just under a touchdown. This one is a touchdown favorite. I'm going to take San Jose State -7 at a very, very, very bad Fresno State. They've lost all the things that made them great just a few years ago, and I think San Jose State's going to win this in double digits. I'm going to take the -7 happily, 3-unit play, $432. And then finally, I'm going to take my team that's been good to me. I think 4 out of the 6 weeks we've done this year. UNLV, I'm taking the 9.5 versus Air Force. They're at home, getting 9.5. They're pretty good at covering the spread. They may lose this game, but I think they're going to keep it close. So I've got a 1-unit play on that at $144.
Yeah, I'm going to take UNLV plus 280 on the money line straight here because Air Force hasn't really played well, and they've played even worse on the road here. Yeah. Now, it'll be interesting to see how UNLV sort of bounces back after sort of realizing they were UNLV last week versus San Jose State, who put it on them pretty good. We'll see if they can sort of get their sails back underneath them and put on a good performance, because I do think they can play with this Air Force team from what we've seen from Air Force the last couple weeks. But if they sort of get down after that San Jose State game, Air Force, if they get up, they have the ability to sort of put it on you. You saw that earlier in the year. But the last couple weeks, they haven't been able to really get up, and they've sort of had to try to grind people away, and they haven't been able to do that. So UNLV plus 280, 125 on that straight bet for me. And we'll move to the Pac-12, where we got a couple good ones here in the Pac-12. We'll start with USC-Utah. This one was a bit polarizing for me because you know how I love taking Utah, certainly Utah at home versus USC. But honestly, if I was probably taking somebody in this game, I'd probably take USC because I still think they're overrating this Utah team a little bit. Defensively, they just don't seem to be what they've been. Basically the whole Kyle Whittingham area. This is probably the worst Utah defense I have seen under Kyle Whittingham, and that's, I don't know, 20 years. So they played 2 offensive teams in UCLA and Florida. Haven't been able to really stop either and lost both games. Now, that being said, both games were on the road. So, it's much difficult to go into, Utah and win. This USC team, I will say, continues to get it done. This is one of those where if you watch USC play, you probably have a different feel about them than if you just are looking at the score. Because once again, that Washington State game was a 3-point game with about a minute left in that fourth quarter or third quarter, and then they tacked on a couple touchdowns late. and stretch that lead out. And that's sort of what USC has been doing. But I don't know defensively if Utah can sort of slow them down like they've been able to do in years past. So what do you make of this USC-Utah matchup here?
Yeah, I've had this round in the chamber for the upset and getting ready to pull the trigger on the upset on USC for a while now. I think, you said it, they haven't really been, the score shows dominant, but they've actually been close in a lot of games and actually had some pretty poor defensive performances. And I had this one circled. I thought, Utah is going to play defense. USC is going to go in there and have trouble. But then I watched Utah play this last week against UCLA and just really struggled to do anything defensively. And I mean, UCLA was taking screen passes to the house, missed tackles everywhere, blown coverages. And so I think USC is going to get this one. I think I'm going to keep that round chambered for another week and start looking ahead for another upset. I think they're due one before the end of the regular season, but we're running out of opportunities.
Yeah, I looked at it, and I also was curious if maybe weather would have come into effect, but it's still pretty nice in Salt Lake City right now, so you don't even get the, sort of weather advantage that usually Utah plays with, starting around this time of year. So the other thing is, though, Utah might be able to outscore USC too. Utah's offense has been fine, which is the weirdest thing. Utah finally has a team that can score 30, 35 points, and, the defense isn't there with them. You give this offense to some of those Utah teams the last, 10 years, they easily are undefeated. But just a weird sort of circumstance there, but should be interesting to see. Utah could still win this side of the conference, too. They got one conference loss to UCLA. UCLA goes up to Oregon next week, so it's still in play if Utah can beat USC here and get on a roll. Next up, two teams who are probably sort of trying to stay touch here with Oregon. With the sort of disastrous trip with Washington, down south. One of these two teams could keep themselves halfway relevant here. I think we both think Oregon's probably a pretty decent favorite now with, like I said, Washington losing both games that they went down south for. So Washington State goes to Oregon State. Who do you think has an advantage here? I definitely lean Oregon State here. I think Washington State has played tough, but I think we put a lot on that win in Wisconsin, and then you look back at that win in Wisconsin, and I think a lot of teams would have gone in there and won in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about this matchup here. I wanted to take the points here, but I think Oregon State's going to be able to find a way to get this one done. But I think this is going to be a really hard-fought game. I think it could be a low-scoring game, actually. I think this could be some defenses that come out to play, and we could have a nice little under. Maybe I haven't looked at that line exactly, but I'm just going to see what happens on this outcome. I think it's going to be a really hard-fought division battle, and but I think the home team's going to have the advantage here.
Yeah, I ended up really liking Oregon State here because I just think they're the better football team, and I think at home in Corvallis, they'll be able to get up for this game. They've also had sort of a week to prep for this game. Washington State's coming off the tough game versus USC, traveling back up north. So I really like Oregon State, and I just think they're the better football team here. So one straight bet between us here in the Pac-12. I have Oregon State minus the 3.5 for 500. All right, let's move to the SEC, and we got a couple games that are, I guess, worthwhile talking about. Really, one game worthwhile talking about, and two sort of nice matchups on paper, but I don't know how good either of the four teams are. But Alabama-Tennessee is the big game this week. But this is a little bit hard to sort of handicap here because we don't know who's playing quarterback for Alabama currently. If it's Young, I lean way more heavy Alabama if he's healthy. If it's unhealthy Young playing, I temper my expectations. If it's the freshman, I think this becomes a much closer game. One, because Alabama will try to make sure it's close, like you saw last week. Basically, that whole second half, they weren't going to let that kid do anything but sort of hand the ball off and run. And even as he started fumbling, I don't even think they wanted him running. So, it's kind of hard to handicap this one because we don't know the quarterback situation with Alabama. But how are you looking at it right now?
Yeah, I think if you could tell me that Young was going to play and he was going to be 100%, I think I'd be pretty confident in telling you Alabama is going to win this football game. But at this point, the way they've been leaning, even if he does play, where he's at percentage-wise, health and ready to go, it could be a whole nother thing. He may be really limited if he does play, and that makes things a little interesting. I think Tennessee's going to want to get this into a shootout, and you were talking earlier about how Bama's just going to want to really just trying to control the ball and not let Tennessee take advantage of any mistakes and just run the ball with their experienced offensive line and their stable of running backs, and that may be able to get it done. I think the spread's kind of right on the money. Vegas is probably thinking the same things we are because you've seen that line, that point line. It's around 62. I think both of these teams were averaging. I know Tennessee's over 40 and Bama's probably in the 30s. But I think Vegas is kind of looking at the quarterback situation as well and thinking that even if Young does play, he might not be 100%. So I think we could have a really good football game. I'm not confident enough to put anything down on my Vols as much as I would like to, but I hope we at least get something close.
Yeah. I think that's where it's hard to sort of handicap this because if Young plays and he's healthy, I don't think they care if they get in a shootout because they'll assume their players on defense will be able to get a couple stops, and I don't know if they think Tennessee can stop them if Young is healthy, Yeah. And if he's not healthy, then it sort of becomes how they game plan. And if it's the freshman, I really think this tempo slows to a crawl, and it's if they can get that tempo slow to a crawl, because I don't think there's any way they win a shootout with that, freshman kid. Now, that being said, he is very talented. He's just very raw and young. So, he might be able to run for 400 yards, judging by some of the breakdowns that I've seen. So it's just really hard to sort of tell what this is, right now. So I just sort of stayed away. If you could tell me a healthy Bryce Young, 7's probably worth taking considering Bama is very rarely under 10 points as a favorite, and I don't think Tennessee has beaten them basically since I think Brody Croyle was taking snaps for quarterback. So just a hard game to go. An interesting game. We'll go to the next one. Arkansas is going to BYU. I don't understand this whatsoever. You're in the middle of your conference season. You're on a little bit of a down track here because you played 3 or 4 tough games in a row, and now you're going to travel out to Provo at night and sort of try to play with them. I think Arkansas is probably better than BYU, but this is a difficult game, and it's probably not one you want to be scheduling if you're trying to win games, certainly if you're trying to get bowl eligible, because it might start to get close here for this Arkansas team because there's not a lot of guaranteed wins left on that schedule here.
Yeah, there's one thing, and I don't think it has a huge impact. I do think it's a day game. I think it's 3:30 our time, so I think it's probably around noon, a little after lunch there. I may be wrong there, but this is a game I looked at and I was like, I'm not going anywhere near this game. There's just no telling. KJ Jefferson's health has been in question. He missed the last game, and their offense looks good most of the time, but I just don't think there's any way you can tell what's going to happen in this game. Arkansas needs to win desperately, but going into BYU is a really tough road trip.
Well, the Bryles kid might start calling 4th-and-1 passes with a third-string quarterback. So, good call there. Anyway, I just stayed away from this one. I don't really know. It's probably two teams, similar talent, sort of similar play styles. It's just one of those you probably want to stay away from. I'd lean home.
I think that's why the spread's hanging around 1.
I'd lean home team if you make me take it, but that's because BYU is at home. If you flipped it, I'd probably lean Arkansas if it was in Little Rock. So, that's where I'm going with this one. LSU versus Florida. I sort of pegged this one as sort of you could regroup your season here. Florida's had a couple tough losses. LSU's coming off, a tough loss, and then the, loss to FSU at the start of the season here. LSU goes to Florida. Really, when I watch these two teams, I think Florida's the better team here. And I will say, they seem to play harder at times. This LSU team sort of is hot and cold, and hot and cold sort of in game. And Florida hasn't won these games, but they never seem to quit. They keep charging and keep coming. You saw it in the Kentucky game, even as they were making mistakes. The quarterback threw a couple picks. Next series, they're coming at you. Same thing with the Tennessee game, where they practically gave everybody in the stadium a heart attack. So I just lean Florida because I think they'll want this a little more than LSU. And I think if LSU certainly gets down, you might see another blowout here. They just seem to fold a little too quickly for my liking in that Tennessee game, even though, things just sort of curtailed badly from the very minute of the kickoff on that one.
Yeah, I look at the quarterbacks here, and I think Richardson's the better quarterback. And I think Florida, LSU's slow starts is going to kick them again. They don't seem to play the first half very much, and in Gainesville is not somewhere where you want to get behind. I just think Florida being less than a field goal favorite here is pretty good at home. I just think offensively they're going to be able to move the ball just a little bit better than LSU, and maybe even make some plays on defense. They got a pick 6 last week, and so I think that's something that could happen as well.
Yeah, definitely so. We'll see if Florida still has the only thing to be worried about would be the defensive breakdowns where they give up these explosive plays. But, I'm not 100% sure how capable LSU is of sort of hitting those explosive plays. Next, we're going to the Sun Belt. One game I thought caught my eye, Old Dominion versus Coastal Carolina. Old Dominion's about to go through the heart of the Sun Belt here. They've had I'd say a solid season for Old Dominion, but they're about to, run through every good team in the Sun Belt to close out the season here. I think I wouldn't say they are capable of winning the Sun Belt, but they could certainly keep themselves relevant here if they can get off to a hot start to Coastal. That being said, James Madison should probably just be declared the winner. I did notice they got a 25th ranking as well this week, so which it's hard to argue considering they beat everybody by 30-plus points. But Old Dominion, Coastal Carolina, how do you see this one?
Yeah, I think Old Dominion's definitely got a shot here. I lean towards almost taking the spread just because I've watched Coastal Carolina play defense, and they continue to win close game after close game. Now, they are winning those games, but they're not really putting anybody away, and that makes me nervous. And this Old Dominion team has proved that they can go in on the road and get big wins. They went in and beat Virginia Tech earlier in the year. So I think this should be a close game, and I think Coastal may get the win, but you're looking at the value with Old Dominion, and they may have a shot.
Yeah, I just think this might get into a little bit of a shootout, and that sort of tips where Old Dominion might be able to make a couple plays. So I skipped our SEC bets, so we'll go back and do those. But nonetheless, Old Dominion plus 340, 125 on that one for me. I just thought it was worth a shot here, especially when you watch Coastal's defense. It's always sort of hot and cold. Now, they're easily able to probably throw up a 40 spot on Old Dominion here. And if they get there, I don't know if Old Dominion can score that much. But if they could keep it in the 30s, I think this could sort of be a game where they could spring the upset. So let's go back to the SEC. What are your straight bets here?
We talked about it. I've got Florida minus the 2.5, $144 on that one, and one we didn't talk about, but I like Mississippi State. They're big favorites on the road. It's minus 6.5, but I think this Kentucky team is spiraling, and I don't know if Will Levis is going to play again in this one. And without him, this Kentucky team is completely lost. They lost to a pretty poor South Carolina team last week, and I think it may get worse this week losing to their West rival in Mississippi State at home.
Yeah, well, I got Florida as well, minus the 2.5. I'm going with one of my big ones. I haven't branched much out of my 500 range, but I'm going 750 on Florida here, minus the 2.5. Certainly, if it stays under that 3 number, I probably wouldn't grab it if it goes over that 3 number on 3.5. But as long as it stays 2.5, 3, I definitely stick Florida with 750, and then I'm going Auburn plus 475 versus Ole Miss. We didn't really talk about this game, mostly because Auburn is terrible, and I still don't know if we know what Ole Miss is. Somehow they've not even still played anybody. I mean, say what you will, they got that Kentucky win. They can try to showboat about their top 10 win over Kentucky, but I think by the end of the year, we might not think Kentucky's a top 10 team. So Ole Miss still hasn't beaten anybody. Auburn sort of had their number the last handful of years. So I thought plus 475 for an Ole Miss team was losing at halftime to Vanderbilt, and granted got a handful of scores there in the third quarter. But if you're playing even with Vandy, even if Vandy is scoring points this year, you should have lost that Kentucky game. I think Auburn can hang around here. Plus 475 just seemed like a lot. So I got 125 on that one as well. All right, let's go to the parlays. Let's have you start out in the parlays, and then I'll close because I got a ton this week. We're back in the parlay market this week.
All right. Well, I've got a few here. Let's see if I can hit something other than just a teaser parlay this week. Maybe make a little bit of money. We're going to start off with a 3-team spread parlay. This is my West Coast teams here. I've got New Mexico minus the 6.5, UNLV plus the 9.5, San Jose State minus the 7 for plus 596. I've got a half a unit play on that, $72. Another 3-team spread parlay at a plus 596. I've got another $72 on it. It's Clemson minus 3.5, Buffalo minus the 17, and Miami of Ohio minus 6.5. I've got a 2-team money line parlay at plus 636, a quarter of a unit play, $36 here. Just a couple upsets, NC State and Penn State. I think I'm going to take a little shot at those two getting the win there. And then my teaser, I've got a plus 6-point teaser for plus 180, 2 units on it, $288. I've got Florida, Mississippi State, and Oklahoma State. I think that takes Oklahoma State up to getting 10 points in that matchup, so really good value there. And then finally, I added another upset special last minute money line parlay plus 1084. UNLV and Michigan State. I got a quarter unit on it, $36. I looked at your plays. I looked closer at that Michigan State, and I think that's pretty good value on the upset play.
Yeah, I think it is. All right, I got a bunch of 3-team parlays this week. We're going to start out with Minnesota minus the 6.5, Utah minus 3.5, and Mississippi State minus the 6 on my first 3-team parlay. The next one, we're going Auburn plus the 14.5, Michigan State plus the 7.5, and Clemson minus the 3.5 versus FSU. Next one, we got the Kent State plus the 9, UNLV plus the 10, and Old Dominion plus the 12.5. Who would have thought? Kent State, UNLV, Old Dominion. Those are the fun parlays where you look back and go, what were you doing? Southern Miss minus the 4, Syracuse minus the 3.5, and Ohio plus the 1 in my next one. And my last 3-team parlay, Memphis plus 5 versus East Carolina, Rice plus 4 versus Florida Atlantic. I almost ended up taking that Rice one straight. I still don't think people respect Rice. They won again last week. This Rice team is kind of good. Pay attention. And we're going to ride this horse. One of us has to take them every week and be disappointed. So I'm going to be disappointed this week. Northern Illinois, plus 2.5 versus Eastern Michigan. Surely they can sneak one here. So Memphis plus 5, Rice plus 4, Northern Illinois plus 2.5. We got a two-team underdog parlay here. Penn State plus 200, Kansas plus 280. That plays 1039 on that one, so 10.4 to 1. Another one, Kent State plus 275, Louisiana Tech plus 210. That one plays 1016, so almost 10.2 to 1. And then my last money line parlay, only plus 601 on this one, but we got the Rice plus 155 and Memphis plus 175 on that one, plus 601 on that. All right, we're going to take our favorite parlays. I mentioned I had a couple of these on here. We're going Oregon State minus 175. Clemson minus 185. That is two-team parlay is plus 141. So you get a little boost on that if Oregon State and Clemson can win outright. Got 250 on that one. Next one is a three-team money line parlay with North Carolina, Mississippi State, and Florida. That one's plus 235. Have 250 on that one. And then I got one Thursday game. Thursday. Baylor Central Florida minus 147 for that two-team money line parlay for 250 on that one as well. So we'll see if Baylor can go on the road versus West Virginia and get that one. I'm not too worried about the Central Florida side of things on that with Temple coming down to them. But back in the parlay game this week, we'll see if we can hit a couple of those after we had sort of a light week with only 3 parlays and didn't hit any of them last week. So that's our show. Week 7 is upon us. We'll see what sort of spits out. Will be interesting going into week 8 as we have a little bit better picture of some of these undefeated teams probably getting a loss here. So should be a fun week, week 7. Be sure to like and subscribe. Look for our NFL show coming out in the next couple days. That's our show, and we're out.
Greenlight Network presents Football Time.